Guys, welcome back for another episode of It's Too Late. I am your host, Alan Mosley, joined this week by the new #1 producer in late night. It's Suzanne Sherman! Suzanne Sherman of the Wasatch Report is now the producer of It's Too Late. So you're coming on for a 1-year stint. That's right, Suzanne?
I'm so excited. Yes. 5 shows a week, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? Believe it or not, Suzanne, actually, I've had people say that, one of the things you could do to just like drive more consistent viewership is you should do you're a late night show, right? So you should do 5 nights a week. You should do Monday through Friday or whatever. So here's the big problem with that. I don't have any money. And I feel like if we're going to do 5 times the content, then we should make 5 times the money, right? I mean, that's only fair.
5 times 0.
You know what? I'm already tired of you. You're fired. You can't be the producer anymore, but I guess you'll still be tonight's guest. So anyway, a lot of people were really upset over this past weekend. It was Memorial Day weekend. So did you enjoy your long weekend, Suzanne?
I enjoyed my long weekend. Anything else going on?
Well, you know what? What's else going on? Enjoy the long weekend. That was a tweet by your favorite vice president of mine, Kamala Harris, who tweeted out going into Memorial Day weekend, enjoy the long weekend. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what? Whatever. Seems fair enough. But that actually upset a lot of our right-wing friends. It kind of looks like I scalped Kamala there, doesn't it?
I kind of like that concept.
It didn't. That wasn't intentional, by the way. I feel like do we have another picture of there? Yeah, there she is.
There you go.
Yeah, America's favorite top cop. Because America loves cops so much right now.
Who knew enjoy the long weekend literally translates to death to the troops?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's pretty fair to investigate Harris for Building 7. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe the Titanic, too. Or maybe Nancy Pelosi gets the credit for that. She's old enough for that one.
Ooh, yikes. So who were some of the right-wingers that were really upset? So you had Nikki Haley and that, who's that young brunette who's like brand new to Congress? That Laura Boebert. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I thought she was a blonde. Is that the one in Colorado?
I don't know. None of these people really matter. Like, I feel like if they
them. One was speaking of people we don't care about. One was Candace Owens too. She had her camo underoos and a wad over that one too.
Yeah. So you always have the right wingers, which, by the way, just as an aside, the right wingers just don't do feigned outrage as well as the left wingers do. That's kind of like the left's MO is we're gonna feign emotional outrage in order to stir public opinion. And the right-wingers try to do it, but it always just comes off as sort of just hollow. I mean, it's hollow for the left-wingers too, but the right-wingers just, they're trying to play the left's game and they don't do it very well. But the thing about it is Kamala's the top cop, right? I mean, you saw the picture right there. And I guess, if anything, I'm going to say thank you to all those right-wingers that were so upset from Kamala Harris saying enjoy the long weekend instead of some sappy hoorah the troops. Because this is probably the first time in memory that I can think of all those Republicans being mad at a cop.
Hard to pick a side, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. That's, there's certain topics that we do on the show where that's actually the thing is I look at the topic and I'm like, all of these people are terrible. And so, since they're all terrible, I feel no shame at all in bringing it up and saying, look at all of these retards.
Agree.
Agree.
I'm trying to stay out of trouble.
Oh, no, Suzanne, come on. I wouldn't get you in trouble. So
that was amusing.
Thank you. When's Sherry coming back? We got to bring Sherry. Jesus Christ. Like Sherry, this is the thing about Sherry, you guys. Sherry's been on enough programs that she knows that my job as the stooge is that when Alan says something, you go, ha ha, good one, Alan. Suzanne just goes,
meh.
Agree. That was amusing. You're an NPC. I think we finally. I'm gonna get that gray picture of the just lines on the face. You're an NPC. We figured it out. Suzanne, what's going on the Wasatch Report and the Red Hot Chili Prepper?
Oh, we got a lot going on. Spring is coming here. I just had
Uh-huh.
a friend bring 20 beehives to my place. And the thing about these beehives, they're all beautifully colored. So it's like art and bees all in one. And we'll get back to the Wasatch Report too. We've been talking about property rights, kind of brought that over to homesteading. So some of the stuff we like to talk about, Rothbard and Locke and philosophical discussions, we're tying it into preparedness and homesteading. So both shows, the Red Hot Chili Prepper and the Wasatch Report, come and check us out. They're on Facebook. And then I've got my website, SuzanneCSherman.com. And the book, The Lost Frontier Handbook, is also available, finally in the printed copy. So that's available at the lostfrontierhandbook.com. It is the way of learning the ways of the pioneer, and it's your ultimate guide to self-reliance.
I hope you pay Jeff more than I pay Sherry.
I think it's about the same.
Oh, imagine that. So actually, you know what? We're not going to do a lot of him-hawing on the front end of the show today because we have I don't know if really announcement is quite the right word. It's more that we have a really big, complex subject that it's just so much ground to cover. And by the way, if you're someone who has problems with blood pressure, this is probably not the show for you because your blood pressure is going to be going through the roof when you hear some of the things we have to talk about tonight. But we're going to do our best to just kind of give an introduction to it and then talk about it more in the weeks to come. And it actually has, and I actually have you to thank for this, Suzanne, because you had directed me to some of this material and I took your advice and I watched it. And then I decided, wow, I can't even, as the kids say.
This was a series that ran on Netflix, and having practiced criminal defense, I was intrigued by the title. It was The Innocence Files, and it was I guess it was a spinoff from the project, the Innocence Project, or the Innocent Project. And they find people on death row, and they've been going and revisiting some cases, capital cases, and finding a plethora of reasons why these people never should have been convicted in the first place. I'll let you run with the rest of the description, Alan.
Well, we're going to do that after the meme of the week in the viewer mail, which is coming up right after this break. Don't go away. Hey, Suzanne.
Hey, Alan.
What time is it?
It's time for Meme of the Week.
My dog, when he's eating, don't tread on me. My dog, whenever I'm eating. Suzanne, this is normally the time that you laugh and say, "Oh, that's hilarious. I love that." Jesus Christ. No, you know what, Suzanne? Just don't even try anymore. Just forget I said anything. I swear, I'm gonna call Sherry right now and see when she's coming back.
She can get in here right now.
I'm gonna text her.
Save this sinking ship.
I'm actually like you think we're joking. I'm actually gonna do this for posterity's sake, so that like on a future episode, Sherry can show people her phone that this actually is a thing that happened.
And you know what? I hope she declines the call like you did when we were all sitting at Poncho's and she's trying to reach you.
Shut up. Jesus Christ. I'm typing in, please come back. Suzanne is awful.
Just horrible.
Terrible. And So we'll just keep you posted. If Sherry writes back before the end of the show, I'll let you know.
Well, I thought you were going to have something witty to say about the meme.
I'm just trying to describe the meme, and then you laugh and say, "Oh, that's awesome," and then I say something else about the meme. Have you never seen this show in your life?
No. Yes, I have. I have many times.
Swear to God. The only thing that can bail us out of this tragedy is the viewer mail, so we're going to go answer some of that. It even says Sherry right there. Look at that. Starting off this week, question number 1 comes from Mary Lynn Wilimowski. Dave and Mary were literally here last week.
I saw.
Yeah. Oh, you did you? So you do know how this show works then, huh?
I did. I should have had some wine. I love how Mary drinks during her shows.
They do drink a lot during their shows, and I'm not judging them, but because I don't even drink. That's actually something that some people don't know about me. I don't drink at all. So like I feel I'm very out of place when I'm visiting Liberty late night. Hold on. I'm sorry, Mary. Quick pause. Sherry Voluntary says LOLOL, and she's still typing. We'll check back. Marilyn Wilimowski asks, Dear Alan and Suzanne, since we only see y'all from the waist up, what pants, if any, are you guys wearing when you do the show? Suzanne, do you wear pants while you're doing your show?
Always. I'm wearing jeans right now. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I mean, in my defense, I've done live shows where I was out on the front of the stage. Like we did episode 50 and then episode 100 and then episode 150 in front of a studio audience. And none of those people filed charges against me for indecent exposure. So there you go. I must be wearing pants. Or they like what they see.
Or they didn't notice.
I swear to God, this is it. This is the end of Suzanne on It's Too Late with Alan Mosley. Sherry's still typing, so this must be a good one. Chris Mallard writes, Dear Alan and Suzanne, what is the best brand of pickle and why is it Clausen? Suzanne, are you a big pickle eater?
I like Bubbies.
Bubbies?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't even eat pickles, so I don't. This question isn't for me. I didn't realize. I've never heard of Clausen pickles, and I've never heard of Bubbies.
Yeah, I don't care for Clausen. I love Bubbies pickles. Those are really good for you.
Okay, how are they good for you?
They've got a lot of probiotics in them.
What the hell does that
pickle
mean?
Juice. It means they're good for you. Let's go what plants crave.
Are you literally Dr. Fauci in disguise right now?
Yes.
That circular
my
reasoning.
Two masks.
They're good for you. Why? Because they have probiotics. What does that mean? It means they're good for you. No, you had your chance. Okay, Walderio writes, Dear Alan and Suzanne, who wins in a fight? Fauci with a hammer or Ben Shapiro with a step stool and a 2x4 from Home Depot? First of all, I mean, why does it have to be from Home Depot? Boy, you're really Johnny on the spot with those answers, Suzanne.
I'm just thinking, can't they both lose?
I mean, they assuredly will in the end, but you know what? I tell you what, I'll give you a serious answer, Lyle. I mean, I'm gonna assume that Ben Shapiro is not such a loser that he can't beat up an old man with the 2x4. Like, right? Like, I know Ben Shapiro is a manlet, but surely he can defend himself from. I mean, how old is Fauci? He's at least in his 70s, if not higher, right?
Yeah, thanks. He's been in since what, Reagan?
Yeah, well, yeah, he's been in that post
before?
for that long, and he was he wasn't exactly a young man then. So, there you go. Boy, Suzanne, I tell you what, you're bringing a lot of energy to the show tonight. Thank you. I appreciate that. Lyle, well, by the way, bonus question from Lyle. Do you play the lottery? Suzanne, do you play the lottery?
No, I don't even think they have it here in Utah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's an opportunity for something Mormon related right there. Weren't we laughing about something to do with the Mormons the other day? What was that we were laughing about? It was something to do with heresy. Do you remember what it was we were talking about?
No, but we're always laughing at the Mormons. I love my LDS friends, though.
Oh no, it was about I'm telling on you. No, I'm getting you in trouble. You was something about how they feel like it's the Constitution is divinely inspired.
Yes, yes, that is true. They do. I was actually at an education event they had, and one of the gentlemen that they put forth, I'm going to keep his name out. He has a PhD in the Constitution from BYU, and they say that it is on a par with the Ten Commandments. That's an exact quote. He said it is exactly as biblically significant as the Ten Commandments, a holy parchment.
Actually, you know what? I'll agree with you. To me, it is totally on par with the Ten Commandments.
Says the atheist. Yeah, my thing is, if it came from God, did he recognize his own fallibility and come up with Article 5 so man who's much wiser could amend it?
Ooh. So I think my comment to you was is that if they equate it government as it exists as divinely inspired, then they would have to then believe that people who support politicians who do not obey their oath to the Constitution and do evil and terrible things, that must be heresy, right?
And then they go and vote in Mitt Romney.
And then they vote for Mitt Romney. I swear to God. This is, by the
Great
way,
stuff.
like if they're all two of the Mormons who are watching the show right now, like this isn't a bash Mormons episode. You do it to yourself. Um, so Adam Sakosan writes, "Dear Alan and Suzanne, beanbag or rocking chair?" Suzanne, do you like beanbags more or rocking chairs?
Rocking chairs all the way.
Now, imagine that. That's all I'm gonna say. I bet you and Meharry, I'm sure, both need a rocking chair.
Yes,
Um, I had a beanbag when I was a little kid, and
I
very
did too.
and very recently, me and Blake, you remember the artist formerly known as Blake, who used to be on the show and laugh at my jokes, unlike some people. Um,
Yes,
me
I
and
bet you're
Blake,
really missing him right now.
ain't that the damn truth? Me and Blake had actually looked at beanbags because we were thinking about how cool would it be if we filled the party room with beanbags and did like a movie night thing on the projector screen. And as it turned out, beanbags are like expensive.
Yeah.
I just assumed it was a bag with rice or something in it and it was going to be like $10. They're like the big beanbags are like hundreds of dollars. It's ridiculous.
Yep. Well, you can make your own, I guess.
That sounds like a good job for you.
I'm not crafty.
Okay. Wait, hold on. Let's go. But you're not all this. I almost said a bad word and then had to promote Suzanne. All this crap you guys are always spewing, and you're not crafty.
Well, I'm good with the preparedness stuff, like food and hunting and that kind of thing. But like making things and sewing, no, I'm not. I'm actually going to go to a gathering, and a girlfriend's going to teach me how to crochet. So my first crocheted sweater I'll make for you, Alan.
Okay. It's the
Yeah.
the official sweater of It's Too Late. Oh Lord, get ready. Andrew Avery writes, "Dear
Oh
Alan
no.
and Suzanne, if your pet turtle develops a soft shell, is that a reptile dysfunction?"
Hmm. Only if it lasts less than 4 hours.
I think we mutually decided that the best way to handle
Is
Andrew's
ignore him.
is just to not address it. Yeah. So Celeste Annis writes, "Dear Alan and Suzanne, would you rather ride a carousel or a Ferris wheel? Carousel or Ferris wheel?"
Lifelong equestrian carousel all the way.
Okay. You know what? I'll tell you what. I actually see this is what happens is I get anecdotes pop up in my head and all of a sudden we're way behind on time. So have you ever seen the Orlando Eye? I think they call it something else now. It's like the Coca-Cola Eye or something. It's a gigantic Ferris wheel with like those huge like self-contained little rooms that are a part of the Ferris wheel. Have you ever seen that in Orlando?
Not in Orlando, but I've seen others like that. Doesn't Vegas have one? And isn't there one in London or something?
I don't know. So me and Annika went on the Orlando Eye, as it was known when we were down there, and I gotta tell you, it's actually pretty boring and terrible. Like,
Yeah, I was on one in Disneyland, and I think it takes like, I don't know, 30 minutes to do one rotation. I like the smaller ones at the fairs, where they're kind of falling apart and they're rickety and they're going around super fast and you don't know if you're going to die or not. Those are fun.
That was exactly what I was about to say, is that if you're not totally sure you're ever going to see your family again, that's how you know you're on a
That's
good
now
ride.
that's a ride.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Tim Weissong asks, Dear Alan and Suzanne, where do the chips in chocolate chip cookies come from? Chocolate bar rejects, intentionally irregular shaped bits, or something else?
I think it depends on who's making the cookie. I mean, if you look at them, some of them look like little, miniature Hershey Kisses, those kind of chips, and then some of them are square.
Mm-hmm.
But they all seem to be uniform in size. I'll say that.
Well, we had the peanut butter Hershey Kiss cookies at episode 150 back in March here when we did the live show. Do you
Was
remember
that
that?
the eggs one?
The eggs
The
one.
Cadbury eggs and all those different ones? Was that it? Was
No,
it different ones?
episode 150 that you were
Oh,
in attendance at. Jesus Christ. How do I mute you on this damn thing? Final question. Rachel Watson Kennerly writes, Dear Alan and Suzanne, should John Cena apologize to America for his role in bringing Fast and Furious 9 to life? You heard about all that crap about John Cena bending the knee to his Chinese overlords. Pretty much everybody in Hollywood does that
of
nowadays.
course they
Is
do.
you can't offend China. Yeah. So, I mean, if he's gonna apologize to China, he should apologize to America for being a communist sympathizer, I would think.
Sure, why not?
Well, I tell you what, you just bring the hard hitting, just,
There is
just
there is
the.
nothing about John Cena that inspires me. I got nothing for that.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Suzanne's got nothing. So we're going to be right back after this break to get into the serious business, talking about the truly criminal justice system. Be right back after this. Your ad could be playing right now, reaching thousands of potential customers. Sadly, it's not, but it could be. Find out how to be an advertised sponsor for It's Too Late with Alan Mosley. Email us at info@alanmosley.tv. Guys, welcome back to the show. So what we referenced earlier in the show is I was looking for something to watch on Netflix, and our friend Suzanne said you should check out this docuseries on Netflix called The Innocence Files. Now, what The Innocence Files is a docuseries detailing some of the cases that the Innocence Project had worked on to exonerate these innocent men who had been imprisoned by the justice system. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the documentary itself, it certainly was about the cases and was about the victims in the cases, but it wasn't really just highlighting sob stories. It wasn't really trying to say, well, what could we have done better or different? What it was really trying to do is it was trying to highlight, how did we get here? Like, how did these guys end up in prison? What went wrong? How did the system fail so that we wind up with these terrible stories in these cases, so that we end up making a documentary about them? And so with that said, I'm actually going to go just a really brief overview. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these cases. And starting with the first two cases that were highlighted were that of Levon Brooks and Kennedy Brewer. Now, these two cases were linked together because they happened in the same community down in Mississippi, and it was for a similar crime. The convictions being for capital murder and sexual battery. For Levon Brooks, he ended up serving 16 years in prison before he got out. It wasn't a death penalty case, but it was a life imprisonment case. And then for Kennedy Brewer, he served 13 years in prison for the same charges, and his was a death penalty case. He was on death row. So I'm going to take a really quick break right there before I get into some of the details of those two cases to turn it over to Suzanne. One of the things that you see pop up multiple times in the documentary is these poor public defenders who are advising their their defendants, that if you have the choice between having to deal with a death penalty case versus just a meager old many years in prison case, what, I guess more kind of I'm just asking you, Suzanne, if you had a case where them playing ball means lesser charges, or them not playing ball means they're going to seek the death penalty, be honest. What do you tell them to do?
Obviously, it depends on the circumstances of the case, how conclusive or persuasive that the evidence is. But I've had many clients, not on the on death penalty issues, but where the police have them to rights and there's really no fighting. And the best you can do is to get the best plea agreement you have. This kind of brings us into a subject that we talked about before with as much as I dislike the term constitutional rights, you do have a
Mm-hmm.
constitutionally guaranteed right to a jury trial and a speedy trial. If you want a trial that's going to
Sure.
drag on for months or years, as I have some friends right now, you have to waive your time trial. And now what we've seen in this past year is like, well, because of COVID, we're not going to honor any of these constitutional guarantees that provide to have a speedy trial. So what we're seeing with a lot of these death penalty cases is, look, the best we can do is try to save your life. So if you will plead to this, you're going to get LWOP, which is life without parole. And oftentimes, people who don't have the ability to pay for their counsel end up taking these pleas. And the downside is all of these employees, you're talking about the judge, you're talking about the defense counsel and the prosecutor, these are all people that are being paid by the state. Interestingly enough, though, and I've worked as court appointed counsel both at the trial and appellate level, is you only get paid a certain amount as the attorney representing these people. I mean, in an appellate case, I probably got paid 20 cents on the dollar for the time that I put in. Most of the attorneys that have
Sure.
a lot of these cases aren't going to put that kind of time in and lose that kind of money. So stuff does get overlooked. One of the main claims as a basis for an appellate of a conviction is what we called IAC, ineffective assistance of counsel. Now, if you compare that to the prosecutors, their resources are limitless. The state has an unending amount of resources to use to convict them. The prosecutor's client is the state. The state's not going to run out of money. They get paid either way. So the scales of justice are not tipped. And I think this series does a great job of pointing it out. They are tipped, they're not even, I should say.
Now, I'm gonna just to talk about those two cases. So in both cases, both men were completely innocent. They were both found guilty. Brooks getting the years, and Kennedy Brewer getting the death penalty. Brooks served 16 years before being let out of prison. There was only one significant piece of evidence against Brooks, and that was bite mark evidence, which is a practice that has really been proven to be unreliable at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Bite mark evidence is not something you would hang your entire case on. And we'll get back to that in a moment. Now, he remained in jail despite the fact that other cases then started to arise in the same community with the exact same MO. And officials decided, oh, that's just a copycat killer. This is a copycat. This isn't that we have the wrong guy, which actually leads us to Kennedy Brewer. He served 13 years in prison before him being let out. And it's a good thing he was let out because he did indeed receive the death penalty for it. He was convicted as being the alleged copycat killer in these slangs in this community in Mississippi for raping and murdering a young child, a young girl. Now, in his case was also exactly the same. They had the primary evidence was bite marks, and that ultimately led them to being convicted and found guilty. Now, in both of these cases, the doctor in that went on the stand to testify that, oh, it was bite marks and these men absolutely did it. So first of all, just really quickly, it turns out that most likely it was crawfish. It wasn't even a human. It wasn't even human bite
Right.
marks.
I
But
think both bodies were dumped into water, right?
Yes, both bodies were dumped into water. And so I'm going to turn this back over to you here as it pertains to these two cases. In both cases, there's only circumstantial evidence at best, with the exception of the bite marks, which again turn out to be faulty evidence. In neither case is there anything that resembles a murder weapon. In both cases, the convicted did have alibis, albeit they couldn't account for all the time that the children were abducted. In both cases, there's not a shred of other evidence, primarily DNA. There's no other evidence worth mentioning that can tie either of these men to these slayings and these rapes. Which leads us ultimately back to this. How common is it, in your knowledge, of there to be something like a copycat killer? And why is it that law enforcement immediately assumes that that is what it is, and they never even think for a moment that maybe they have the wrong guy in custody?
I think they're more concerned with solving the case, closing the case, and moving on to the next one. Oftentimes, there are so many cases that they have. The prosecutor just wants to get it done and move on, and the criminal defense attorneys, unfortunately, many of whom are appointed. There's only so much they can do under the circumstances. Like I said, I was willing to put many, many hours into a case and receive, like I said, pennies on the dollar in compensation. But I was really amazed. I had no answer. And you mentioned blood pressure. My blood pressure started soaring
Sure.
when I'm seeing this. How can you ignore something so serious? Because even if you think that the original guy that you accuse this is a bad guy anyway, and I've heard this with people when I was starting to talk about some of these cases on my show page. Well, this guy that did it, he did all these other things as well. But the problem is, you really have to convict somebody for the crime and punish them for the crime in which they were charged. And my feeling here is, if somebody is doing something the exact same way, you're doing the community, society at large, a tremendous disservice by not finding or seeking to find people that are doing these killings. So to just say, well, this was a copycat, to me, means you're also, happy with putting somebody in prison for a long period of time, if not executing them.
So, as a quick parting shot before we move on to one of the other cases, Forrest Allgood is the name of the prosecutor in Mississippi that prosecuted both of these gentlemen. And even after objectively exculpatory evidence came to life, after that evidence was presented, prosecutor Forrest Allgood fought to keep Kennedy Brewer in jail for 7 more years, fighting on technicality after technicality, as opposed to simply acknowledging that the evidence showed that the man was innocent. So I'll give you one more quick soundbite before we move on to the next one. Is that common? Is it common to have prosecutors fight tooth and nail to keep people in prison despite mounting evidence?
In the next section, we can talk about this in the next segment about, there's a really good article that started this whole discussion with this. Judges and prosecutors are complicit in injustice. And in there, they cite another article where the writer asks if you can actually be a good person and still be a prosecutor, and why prosecutors and defense attorneys have such different goals, and how the prosecutors, we talked about Robert Higgs, where he says any police officer, any man that puts on a uniform that goes out to infringe upon people's natural rights, he says all cops are bad. So I found this interesting. It was kind of expounding upon that Higgsian notion that anybody going into this line of work is ultimately not a very good person.
Well, that brings us to Frankie Carrillo, who was from the Linwood community out in California. When he was only a 16-year-old boy, a boy, not a man, a boy, he was found, actually pull it up here, he ended up serving 19 years in prison, it wasn't a death penalty case, and was convicted of murder and 6 counts of attempted murder for a drive-by shooting that happened at night in a nearby neighborhood. Now, the interesting things about his particular exoneration is, again, let's talk about, I'm talking to you, counselor. If I said to you, Suzanne, I'm in trouble, they're accusing me of this crime, but don't you worry, not only did I not do it, They have no physical evidence, no DNA. I have an alibi. They can't place me at the scene. There is no murder weapon, and there's a person from a local gang that has come forward testifying with intimate details of the shooting, saying that I was not there. Does that seem like a case that I would get off?
This was a really interesting case. I think what struck me was it wasn't until they went back, I think, and looked at this from the Innocence Project and did a, I think, wasn't a mock-up. Was that the one where they did a mock-up of the shooting?
So this was the one where ultimately the only primary evidence they had against Frankie was the other people on the block who were theoretically the ones being shot at by the rival gang.
Okay.
They all testified that we saw the shooter in the car in the passenger seat. It was Frankie. He did it. And indeed, every single one of them recanted that testimony and said, not only do we not know that if he was him or not, we could not have known. There was no way for us to see. It was at night and it was too dark. And as for a mock-up, this was one where they actually took the appellate judge out there with a crew and simulated the events of where the moon is, the
Yes.
nighttime, where the car is on the street with the street lights. And sure enough, none of the people there could see the face of the people in the vehicle.
And that's what I was referring to. What really struck me was why wasn't this done at the trial level in the first place?
Yes. So I'll go ahead and turn that right over to you right there. It's Frankie
Yeah,
ended
and
up serving 19 years before they get around to this little test. How could this happen?
shame on defense counsel for not doing that. Personally, I hold them to blame for not doing that. Get out there, see the scene. What was the weather like at that at that time? What was the, like you said, the moon? Could they have seen it? All it took was them driving by one time with the lighting under similar circumstances, and it was very obvious. Looking in, you couldn't see the driver, or you couldn't see the shooter at all. You couldn't see in the car.
That's going to lead us on to the next one. Thomas Haynesworth is one who has a somewhat similar story to the first two gentlemen, Levon Brooks and Kennedy Brewer, in that while he was already in custody, several more crimes continued to take place in the community where the original crimes took place. And of course, obviously, they were trying to pin the first 3, 4, 5, 6 attacks on Thomas Haynesworth, but they couldn't then pin attacks 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 because he was in jail. He could not
Hmm.
possibly be in. And he was one. This is sort of kind of at the advent of DNA and different states that then introduced DNA as a last ditch effort to exonerate the accused. So he was one where ultimately it was DNA that set him free. However, one of the things I really want to bring up specifically with him is that the DNA indeed led ultimately to the true perpetrator. And that perpetrator had originally been identified during the investigation. But the police never investigated that lead. How often does that happen, Suzanne?
I have no way of quantifying it, but I was watching another one of these documentaries about the Night Stalker and about how they left a car that had so much evidence out under the rain and they lost a lot and it resulted in more people getting killed. So again, when you are a government employee and your client is the governor when you're or is this, the government when you are a prosecutor, when you're a police officer, we've seen they don't there's no penalty for getting it wrong. We're not seeing that. For instance, if police sees evidence that is in violation of the Fourth Amendment, the only course of redress is just simply suppressing the evidence. There's nothing against the police officers. They're not the records aren't adversely affected by that. They just suppress the evidence, and they're not admonished. They're not punished in any way, sense, or shape, or form. So there are a few things here that struck me about this case. I think this gentleman, he was actually going to get potatoes for his mom. He was
Yes.
literally going to the store for his mom. And the first thing I thought of was when we were talking about George Floyd and all these other incidents the past few years that we've been discussing, is this really addresses the notion that we hear from a lot of the the pro-police contingency. If you're doing nothing wrong, the police will leave you alone. So here's a kid going to the store to get sweet potatoes at his mother's behest, and he spends how many years in prison? And the other issue is the police lineup. And I believe in this case, the police, after one of the victims said she couldn't make a positive identification, they did another lineup, and then the police slipped in this little bit of information. Everybody that you're looking at has been arrested. They are in custody. So now she's under the impression that she's looking at criminals. Forget about the presumption of innocence. I'm sorry. And then the third thing that struck me also, this was a white woman, and the suspects all on here were black. And you hear all these allegations of systemic racism, but here in this police lineup with a white victim and black suspects, they did an experiment, and they took pictures of the man that actually committed the rape and the man who was accused, put it side by side. Every white person that looked at these two pictures next to each other commented how they looked alike. Every black person they showed, they immediately said they looked nothing alike. And then they were very particular with how they didn't look alike. The hairline's different, the mouth is different, the nose is different, the ears. I mean, they were able to pick it.
Sure.
So when they were able to differentiate. But then the analysis turned to, well, why is this? And it's nothing insidious. It's nothing evil. They said this is just simply an acknowledgement about how the brain works and recognizes people of different cultures and ethnic backgrounds differently than it does your own. That's not judging anybody. It's just the way it is. So that was just another reason why these lineups are unreliable. And this is why, with the advent of DNA testing, hopefully more of these people will be freed. And this is another reason why I absolutely cannot support the death penalty.
I'll give you one more example before we take our next commercial break. We only have a minute to go over this one. Chester Holman III, who also served 25 years in prison before ultimately being exonerated. The couple of points that pulled out about Chester, again, no physical evidence, no murder weapon. They actually caught him going towards the crime scene as opposed to theoretically fleeing the crime scene. And this was literally in a matter of minutes from when the actual shooting, a killing and robbery of a young Pitt student took place. And yet they don't find the murder weapon inside the vehicle. And theoretically, the vehicle had 4 to 6 people in it, but his, of course, did not. It was just him and his girlfriend at the time. So none of the eyewitness accounts line up with Chester's actual situation. And they have no other physical evidence at all. And yet he's ultimately convicted and serves 25 years. But here's the point I want to bring up on this one, and then we'll take our next break. From the time that he was initially taken to jail, he's arrested for this crime. He sits in jail for 2 years while the prosecution is building its case. That doesn't seem like that's honoring his right to a fair and speedy trial to me.
Because defense counsel always has them waive it. He was probably being represented by the by the defense counsel, a public defender, and they just don't have time to get everything. I'll tell you, I was outside of a courtroom, and a friend of mine was sitting there, and a prospective client came up and said, hey, I need some help. This is my case. And her first question to him was, can you waive time? I can only help you if you waive time. So if he wanted a speedy trial, he wasn't going to get it. Defense counsel does not have time to prepare. And this is the problem. These people are sitting in jail waiting. Their lives are on hold. And the attorneys don't have time to get to them. Sometimes the attorneys aren't heard from, for a month at a time. The firm that I used to work for, I gave a quick check, and here is one of the reviews. I'm not going to give their name, but they said, although, and this was the managing partner, was friendly, courteous, and knowledgeable, only my initial interview was with him, and this is true. After that, they assign it to an associate. I was one of those associates at this firm, people just out of the bar exam, just having passed, not making much money, but you get a lot of court experience. But he said he never expected a lot of service. He didn't have a lot of money, but he said the case was simple. one with direct evidence, but it was dragged out for a year, and he was only offered a plea deal. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I fell into this, I guess, some people fall into these cracks where they don't qualify for the public defender, but they will go to law firms that will take their case for very little money, but unfortunately also give them very little service. I know we have to wrap this up, but really quick. I was assigned to take a file I'd never seen before into court after lunch and argue a 1538-5, we called them 1538-5 hearings, motion to suppress evidence. I'd never seen the case. I told the bosses there, I have to read this. No, you don't need it. Just go to court. I sit down, I start to review it. There is absolutely nothing factually representative of the case before me. I called the partner. I said, what the heck is this? There's nothing about the incident. Oh, when clients can't afford it, we just have a boilerplate that we send the attorneys out with and send it to court. It was obviously going to lose, and it was set to lose. And they had no misgivings about doing this. Send this guy to modest means panel or send it to somebody else, but don't take their money and then don't vigorously defend them because they can't afford it.
Wow. And then of course, obviously on top of that, if that's how unlikely their chance of victory it is on some petty misdemeanor or another, imagine how much more dire the situation is if it's capital murder.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're in jail. I mean, 25 years. We're seeing some of these people that have been in there for 30 years or more. One of them, I think, served 2 years or 16 years and died 2 years later after with cancer. So, I mean, the rest of his life he lost. He really did get a death penalty.
Well, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna put a little bit more light on the judges and prosecutors and how they kind of play into the justice system, and then we're gonna make a little announcement about some more coverage on this topic in the future. So stick around. We'll be right back. If you're enjoying tonight's show, consider supporting the program by becoming a member of our Patreon. That's over at patreon.com/Alan Mosley. Welcome back to the show, everybody. So I'm going to just, for a quick visual here, show some people this article from The Hill. Judges and prosecutors are complicit in injustice, which that's not pulling any punches right there. Now, this article is an op-ed that was written by David S. D'Amato for The Hill, but he is in great detail referencing an academic article called "Can You Be a Good Person and a Good Prosecutor?" that was written by law professor Abby Smith. Now, Suzanne, I know that you've dug into Abby Smith and this fairly lengthy academic article about can you be a good person and a good prosecutor. So I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, this was a great article. I kind of went down the rabbit hole of links on this. And some of the statements she had I thought were very compelling here. You know, the criminal defense attorneys were kind of viewed as the bad guys. I recall once I was in the downtown Hall of Justice, right actually by where that Amtrak shooting was, by the way. And I get into the elevator and two police officers are in there. And I say, "Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?" And one of them just quips, "I'd be a lot better without people like you trying to get people back out of jail." And the other one kind of told him, knock it off. But that's kind of the impression a lot of people have about us, that the guys in the white hats are the prosecutors. They're the ones that are saving society. And what we've seen right now, they're doing some members of society some tremendous disservices. And here's some really interesting quotes that they start out with in here. In this article. Let me find some of them. This is a couple of quotes from prosecutors. I won't give you too many, but the citizen's safety lies in the prosecutor who tempers zeal with human kindness, who seeks truth, not victims, who serves the law and not factional purposes, and who approaches his task with humility. That's the way it should be. Here's something else. The power we wielded over people's lives made us feel as if we were the executors of morality. Alan, just a quick break. Remember when I was first on this show with you, the very first time you asked me where things in government started going wrong. And my first impression was, I really think it's where we started legislating morality, making morality part of the law when you're not hurting anybody. going
Sure.
on with this quote, a word from us, meaning the prosecutor, and the person goes free. Another word, and he is whisked away. And we have been handed power at an age when we are not likely to understand it and use it wisely. So, what she gets into here, she says it's understood that the prosecutors have the high ground, and most people simply assume that they're the good guys and they're on the right side. And when I started practicing law, I took a lot of heat from friends. Oh, how can you be defending criminals? And I just tell people, you know what? If people don't defend them, they can't go to jail. Does that make you feel better? So we were talking about other people that had been like the copycat criminals and others that were
Sure.
accused of being the actual criminals in the cases you mentioned earlier. And she makes a good point also. The immediate reaction is an alternative version of the facts, exonerating or mitigating circumstances, or simply a different perspective. Their immediate reaction is to reject this. And this is a real thing. We called it, not we collectively, me, I didn't like this, but this was quipped. I had a friend who was a former prosecutor who said, yeah, they call it the Saudi and the Toddy defenses. Some other dude did it and that other dude did it. And they would just dismiss that right away. Well, that's what we saw in those cases that you saw, to the detriment of those individuals who spent decades behind bars.
So there's one concept that I know that got brought up, which is, specifically for a prosecutor, you can be a good prosecutor or you can be a successful prosecutor, but it's really difficult to be both. And what they mean by that is that a good prosecutor in the moral and ethical sense would be one that would be less concerned about conviction rate and would be more concerned about getting it right, obviously, making sure that innocent people don't go to jail, being open-minded, being always open to understanding that humans are not infallible and mistakes get made, but also that you're taking an oath to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution, just the way many elected officials are. And so the prosecutor is a good prosecutor in the ethical sense, should be looking out for the rights of the defendant, constitutionally speaking, in the same way that the defense is, correct? But yet, that's what a good prosecutor would do. But if you're a good prosecutor, it's very possible that you can be painted as weak on crime. That the community that ultimately can choose to elect you or elect someone else into that office, the community might be always, because of the prosecutors and judges are always such vaunted positions, right? Everyone always respects and loves the DA and the judges. These are people that are supposed to have great sense and judgment beyond us mere mortals. And because of that, it is very plausible that a successful DA, one who is worried about getting elected, and worried about getting elected means you just convict everybody at a perfect rate and you're tough on crime, and that means you don't give a damn about what these defendants want. You stick it to them. And in a world where a successful DA can replace the good DA, you can see that that is the definition of a systemic problem.
Yeah, absolutely. The ultimate goal for all sides should be justice, right?
Yes.
And there's a great quote in here also. It's that any prosecutor can convict the guilty. It takes real talent to convict the innocent. This would be just another cheap but clever shot about prosecutors if, and again, watch this series if you think we're lying, if there weren't so many cases in which prosecutors have proudly convicted the innocent and refused to back down even upon compelling proof that the conviction was wrongful. Now, this article was written 20 years ago, right around the time when some of these cases were going through. And I'll give you an example. Everything we're talking about here, Alan, I'm using my experience, and I will tell you something I have seen, experienced firsthand. The summer I took the bar exam, I was working with a friend of mine, and he was a former police officer, and he was working for this group called PORAC. It was a peace officers research assistant. It was representation for law enforcement officers. This officer from Los Altos Police Department, Rafael Rosario was his name, was accused of sexually harassing, sometimes assaulting women that he had pulled over while he was out patrolling. And the district attorney, her name was Joanne McCracken. I was working with the attorney helping him. He was convicted on every single charge. Her response was, wow, I can't believe I got a conviction on these cases. I only put them in there to bolster the main few of them.
Hmm.
So, what she's saying is, I went forth with the case that I knew we didn't have grounds for conviction, but if I just throw this in with all these other more serious cases with more evidence, they will have the effect of making it look more likely that he was molesting or harassing, assaulting the women that we're charging him for. And he was charged for all of them, even though she admitted she really didn't have enough. And that should have been addressed. That should have been the defense counsel should have reported that right away, in my opinion. But here's the problem: it's a really cozy little community.
Sure.
We're friends with the judges. We see these people all the time. The DAs. We have to work with them every time. So you go to bat and you are just, absolutely vicious in your defense. You're going to have a hard time working with these people. Also, the same thing with the prosecutors. They rely a lot on cooperation with the police. So if they start calling out police and thinking that they're lying and discrediting them, then they might not get the cooperation they need for their convictions, not justice. Conviction doesn't always mean justice.
So on that note, because I know we're running short on time, this was one of those things. So when you and I first got together and said we should do an episode where we talk about not necessarily the docuseries Innocence Files directly, but more of look at all these issues that they trudged up. Look at all of this injustice. Look at I mean and I've got a little the laundry list of prosecutorial misconduct, immunity.
Yep.
16,000 cases of misconduct in the last decade, yet less than 2% of them suffer any consequences. Circumstantial evidence, faulty evidence, eyewitnesses, testifying, which is the term for law enforcement lying under oath in court, lying to defendants, pitting different witnesses against one another, coaching witnesses, and talking about the finality versus justice, that the system seeks finality, it doesn't seek justice. And so that's why it's really a misnomer to call it a justice system at all. And ultimately, I think you and I had come to the conclusion that this is, I mean, we could do 20 episodes on
Yeah.
it's just, I do recommend people go watch Innocence Files on Netflix. And you won't have to have done it in order to follow what we're getting ready to announce. But it'll be great if you do, just so that you can see over a period of decades and covering large swaths of the system, you see the areas for misconduct, for corruption, for nepotism. And that actually leads us to, so we decided we're actually gonna do that. We're gonna do a 3-part miniseries where we break this down into 3 pieces and do long form expositions on the different issues that have been brought up by the Innocence Project. And part 1, and I'm not going to give you any dates, by the way, because it's going to be in the future. Just every so often, we're going to release a part. The first part is going to deal with law enforcement, investigative misconduct, evidence, immunity, lying, and the monopoly on violence. Part 2 is going to deal with the courts, which is juries and how they're manipulated, prosecutors and their misconduct and immunity, and judges and their vaunted status despite repeated failure. And then finally, part 3, to sort of bring it all home from a philosophical perspective, is to talk about reform, abolition, and the non-renewable resource of time. And that's really going to include talking about sort of this faux incentive structure, finality versus justice, and how people responsible for hurting so many innocent people end up not facing any consequences. I'll let you have the last word, Suzanne, before we wrap up. It's a lot.
Well, just tying up what we were talking about with the convictions and ignoring some of the exculpatory evidence. Again, this gal makes a great statement here explaining that the desire to win inevitably wins out over these procedural matters. such as fundamental fairness, disclosure, concealment of exculpatory evidence by prosecutors. She says that remains a serious problem. And, we're making some pretty serious allegations here, but this is why I like to provide, for people information that's easily accessible. Watch this series. And if you want to see kind of a comparison where somebody who is of means and has a significant amount of financial resources, how they can defend themselves, watch a series called The Staircase. I believe that's also on Netflix, but this is a very wealthy author who was accused of murdering his wife, and the millions of dollars that he spent to keep himself out of jail and how long he was able to be free, as opposed to these other people who were falsely accused and spent years before their trial and then decades after being falsely convicted.
On that right there, we're gonna take our last commercial break for the night. But before we do, where can people go to see and support Suzanne Sherman's and the Wasatch Report?
I appreciate it. On Anchor FM, you can go there and find the Wasatch Report. We have a Facebook page, Suzanne Sherman's The Wasatch Report Radio Show. Also, the Red Hot Chili, CHILLY Prepper. And then my website, SuzanneCSherman.com, has my articles that have been published, as well as blogs and my personal thoughts.
Guys, on that note, we're going to take our last commercial break. Stick around for the finale. Hi guys, it's Alan here, and I want to take a moment to let you know about one of our supporters who started a new business. Laura Moreau sells 50 different health and wellness all-natural products, from weight loss, supplements, energy enhancers, body toning, longer and stronger hair, and so much more. Do you like coffee? Well, they even have coffee that'll help you drop some pounds. And who doesn't want to drop a few pounds? Go check her out at her online store at lauramoreau.itworks.com today. That's lauramoreau.itworks.com. Like our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/AlanMosleyTV. You can follow me on Twitter. It's twitter.com/AlanMosleyTV. Subscribe to our YouTube page. It's youtube.com/AlanMosleyTV. Also, guys, don't forget, don't just complain about not having free speech decentralized platform to go support. You can do that with Odyssey. We're on Odyssey.com. You can find us at Alan Mosley TV or search It's Too Late with Alan Mosley. As well as on all your favorite podcasting platforms of choice, thanks to Anchor FM. It's anchor.fm/Alan Mosley TV. Suzanne, are you still with me?
Of course.
We're going to get you out of here on this one. Is every piece of chocolate just a chocolate chip?
No.
Based on what?
I don't know. Why do you do this?
So I would argue that any piece of chocolate that is put into a cookie is a chocolate chip, no matter the size of the chips and the cookie.
Yeah, I was thinking more like chocolate bars.
But if I put a chocolate bar on top of my 1-inch cookie, that's still the chocolate chip.
Okay.
How dare you? This is it. This I swear to God.
Sherry!
Sherry!
Help me.
What did Sherry say? I gotta go back.
Yeah,
actually, Sherry said I'm home now, but the episode's over.
Oh.
So
thanks, Sherry.
So that's it. We're done. Guys, thank you so much, and we will see you next week.